In the spring of 2010, investigators in Palmdale, California, found 29-year-old LaNell Barsock murdered inside her home. Piecing together the scattered clues left by her killer, they were able to recreate the crime. Detectives found that the attack that led to the end of the young nurse's life came by surprise. But when it came to piecing together her personal life in the search for the murderer, the evidence was not quite so straightforward. Hi there, welcome to Just Thought Lounge. I'm Kevin. Today I'd like to tell you about a murder from 2010 that has one of the strangest twists of any case JTL has covered. It's the story of a beautiful and accomplished woman who may have sought love in the wrong places and from the wrong people. Let's take a look. Palmdale, California in Los Angeles County sits in a valley in the Mojave Desert. The drive to Los Angeles from Palmdale is roughly an hour and a half with good traffic. The city, home to large and wealthy employers like Lockheed Martin and Boeing, is amongst the most expensive cities to live in the country. At roughly 7 p.m. on June 16, 2010, officers on duty at the Palmdale police station had a surprise visitor. 28-year-old Lorraine Austin rushed into the building, panicked. Only minutes before, she said, she had discovered her good friend, LaNell, dead in a bloody scene. Lorraine found her friend lying on the floor of her garage. She was on her back, a plastic bag covering her head. Stained towels, plastic sheeting, and bedding surrounded her. It was a horrific scene.
And then I turned around, it was like plastic bags, and I slid on the bags. I'm looking at the blood, and then when I looked, I saw her legs. And then when I walked around the car, she had a bag over her head, and I'm sitting there like, oh my God.
Lorraine ran to her friend. She tried to pick her up, she said, though there was nothing that she could have done. LaNell had passed on. Her friend's first instinct was to call 911, but before she had an opportunity to do so, she heard noises from within the house. Walking in through the laundry room to the kitchen and finally the hallway, Lorraine glanced up the stairs where she saw a male figure. He came towards her as she ran from the house. She drove directly to the police station. Homicide detectives responded to the large home on Rocky Lane and found the scene much as Lorraine Austin had described. 29-year-old LaNell Crystal Barsock was on the floor next to the passenger side of her BMW in the garage. It was not immediately clear how LaNell had been killed. Taking everything in, officers at the scene suspected blunt force trauma to the head. It did not appear as though the murder had taken place in the garage. LaNell had likely been moved from elsewhere in the house to the position where she was found. The trunk of the BMW had been left wide open. Within it sat a collection of bedding, stained with what was presumed to be blood. Underneath the bedding was a pillow with a visible bullet hole straight through it. Forensic testing was performed in multiple areas across the house. A lack of fingerprints at the scene was to be expected after investigators identified a pair of latex gloves discarded in the garage. They did discover a single print, however. A fingerprint, thought to be from a thumb, was lifted from a dark-colored pitcher. Located on the upper rim, the print suggested that someone had lifted the pitcher gingerly in order to move it out of the way. There were additional towels and other sheets on the garage floor, as well as a pile in the laundry area. Other linens and towels which sat on top of the washing machine appeared to have once been folded, but were now disturbed. Someone had attempted to clean up inside the house, but seemed to have abandoned the task partway through, leaving obvious remnants of their attempts in the garage. Inside the house, cleaning products sat out on the kitchen countertop. Adjoining the kitchen was the living room. In that area, the evidence of what had occurred was comparatively little. Investigators found only small spatter stains near to the base of the living room wall. On the opposite side of the living room from the spatter, a single spent shell casing sat on the couch. The bullet came from a 9mm Smith & Wesson pistol. Notably, the carpet in this area was remarkably clean. The spotless carpeting was out of place. Once the mess in the garage was sorted, detectives discovered that an area rug about 7 feet by 9 feet had been pushed into the back seat of the car. Pulling it out, they found more stains, and on it, a footprint. They also found that based on the rectangular ring of discoloration on the living room carpet, this area rug fit perfectly in place. Luminol testing told the rest of the story. A trail from where the area rug had once sat in the living room, through the kitchen, and ultimately to the garage. Why then, with the car partially packed and the house only partially cleaned, had the killer abandoned their attempts to cover up the crime? Was it possible that Lorraine had interrupted the killer's cleanup and caused them to flee? Indeed, Lorraine had claimed to have encountered the killer in the house, and she said she knew exactly who it was.
And then I heard somebody walking upstairs, and he was like coming down the stairs, and I looked and I just ran out the door.
Do you know the guy's name?
Yeah, his name is Willie.
LaNell's autopsy concluded her cause of death was a single gunshot wound to the back of the head. The trajectory suggested that she had been in a seated position when she was approached from behind by her attacker. It was assumed that she had been taken by surprise. News of her death was understandably devastating to family members, particularly her mother Bobby, with whom she had been very close. The third of 5 children, LaNell had grown into a loving and accomplished woman. She was known to be a peacemaker, the type of person who brought others together. Born and raised in the Los Angeles area, LaNell had been studious and academically minded in high school, eventually moving on to Long Beach for university and a career in nursing. By the spring of 2010, the 29-year-old was a licensed vocational nurse with ambitious plans. Her 6-bedroom, 3-bathroom home in Palmdale was ideal for conversion into a small care facility where she could jumpstart a business for in-home care for the elderly. LaNell had purchased the house with her long-term boyfriend, a man named Louis Bonaire. Years earlier in 2005, Louis, who had emigrated from Haiti, was attending English language classes held at the same facility where LaNell was studying part-time for her nursing accreditation. After classes one evening, LaNell offered Louis a ride home. According to friends, the two had an instant connection. Their romance would grow serious over the following 4 years. Most recently, however, the two had been experiencing a rough patch in their relationship. Lorraine explained to detectives that she and LaNell had been friends since their time in high school, over 10 years. As lifelong friends, LaNell often confided in her. Indeed, she had a secret to share. Her relationship on the rocks, she had sought out companionship elsewhere. The young nurse had connected with a man named Ike online through a website called fling.com. The two had dated for 4 months, during which time she had kept a second, pay-for-minutes cell phone to communicate with him. Only days before her death, Louis had discovered the cell phone and her fling with Ike. The couple argued, but they did not part ways. Instead, LaNell told Lorraine that her romance with Ike was over. She and Louis agreed to work through their issues. The only problem was that Louis was still checking the second cell phone. He also kept track of her movements. He followed her at work to see who she may be having lunch with. Louis was the jealous type, Lorraine said. On the morning of the day that LaNell died, Louis had discovered that new minutes had been recently added to her second, no longer secret, cell phone. Perhaps she was not finished with Ike after all. According to Lorraine, she and LaNell had met up earlier that day. They went to a nearby beauty supply store, then back to LaNell's where Lorraine was weaving her hair. Lorraine told police that she was doing LaNell's hair in the living room when Louis interrupted them in a rage, confronting LaNell over the phone minutes and demanding to know if she was still seeing Ike.
He's so thick as fuck. I told her, I said, look, y'all have some issues and y'all need to talk and I don't want to be here.
Recognizing that the couple needed to work through their issues, Lorraine left the house, spending the next few hours at a nearby park to allow time for things to settle down. She returned around 7 p.m. and found LaNell in the garage. Investigators were obviously keen to track down Louis Bonaire, and they didn't need to wait too long. When officers arrived at Bobby's home in nearby Hawthorne to deliver the sad news of LaNell's death, they found that her daughter's boyfriend was staying at her house. Louis worked a maintenance job for the city of Hawthorne. On the nights before his shifts, he would often stay over at Bobby's to save himself the commute from Palmdale in the morning. From there, he was promptly brought in for questioning. Louis claimed to have no idea why he was being questioned. He told detectives that he had last seen LaNell much earlier in the morning before he left to run errands in Los Angeles. His car required a few new parts.
What's your girlfriend then? Yeah, boss. What happened to her? How you would know? You don't know? I need the house early to go fix my car. Tell me about your relationship. Happy? Yeah. Your relationship is good? Honest with you. Okay with her. Is she okay with you? She's okay with me. She's been telling me she's loving me all the time.
Louis's depiction of his relationship as blissful, indeed nearly perfect, immediately raised the eyebrows of law enforcement. They knew from Lorraine that the couple had problems, and they learned more details from LaNell's mother, Bobby, who painted a similar picture. Louis and LaNell had argued frequently. Bobby told police that after one such incident, LaNell called her in a panic. She and Louis had been arguing, and she fled from the house in her car, phoning her mother from the road, terrified.
She called me on the phone. She said, Louis tried to run me off the road, Mama. And she was screaming.
Louis admitted to some recent issues in his relationship with LaNell. He admitted to detectives that she had given him the visible scratch on his cheek. But no relationship is 100% perfect, he said.
You got a scratch on your face. Where did you get that?
This one?
Yeah, the one right across your cheek. Who scratched you?
Oh, that was LaNell across me.
Detectives had more than just their suspicion to back up Lorraine's allegations towards Louis. At the crime scene, they had found what they believed was evidence that clearly outlined Louis's motive to kill his girlfriend. A handwritten letter addressed to him, signed by LaNell. The note had fallen to the kitchen floor. It had been left behind and forgotten, perhaps in the chaos of the murder, or maybe during Louis's haphazard and abandoned cleanup job. In the letter, LaNell informed her long-term boyfriend that she was leaving him to move out of state with Ike. She left him the second phone, the letter says, because it no longer mattered. She would marry her new man and leave the house and everything in it to Louis, as long as he would leave her alone. Louis denied all of this. He knew nothing about a letter and claimed to be unaware of the nature of LaNell and Ike's relationship.
I'm talking about the little letter I was telling you. She's going bye-bye. Yeah, I don't know about that. Who is this guy named Ike? Who is he? Okay. Ike can tell me Ike is a friend.
Eventually, while detectives scrutinized his reaction, Louis was told what had happened to LaNell.
Someone shot her. Oh my God, what's that again? Where she is right now?
She's at the coroner's office, sir. She did not survive her wounds.
Really?
Really?
Oh my God, that's not right.
We understand that this happened.
That's not me. Why did you not do that? Oh my God.
Police obtained a search warrant for Louis's black Nissan pickup truck and searched through it, seeking a link to the crime scene that he had presumably fled. What they found was more surprising. In the truck's cab, they discovered a handful of receipts for car parts purchased at locations in Los Angeles, a roughly 1.5 to 2 hour drive from the house in Palmdale. These receipts were time-stamped and dated within 20 minutes of the time of the murder. Based on Lorraine's timeline, the video footage from the beauty shop, and the autopsy, LaNell was killed sometime shortly after returning home from the shop at roughly 2:30 p.m. At that time, Lewis was shopping in LA. The receipts would need to be verified, and they were. Security cameras from shops in Los Angeles captured Lewis making purchases just as he had told detectives. Lewis's cell phone data further corroborated his alibi. His location data tracked to his purchases and appearances on camera. It showed him along the highway driving to and from the city. Additionally, detectives found no indication that he had been in contact with anyone else, a potential accomplice, who could have been committing the murder on his behalf. Attention then turned to the second love interest, the man named Ike, with whom LaNell had been briefly involved with, and according to the letter, she planned to marry. Ike was found to have been in a job interview at a state university when LaNell was killed. The interviewer verified his presence. Neither Lewis nor Ike could be the killer. At this time, the investigators took stock of what they had uncovered so far, and what may have been overlooked. Chief amongst these oversights were oddities in the initial questioning of Lorraine Austin. First of all, when officers sat down with Lorraine, they checked her handbag for weapons as a matter of procedure. In her purse, they found a bullet.
The sergeant that interviewed you earlier, as part of officer safety, because you have blood on you and you just came from a murder scene, you gotta make sure you don't have a gun in there that could shoot him. So he looked at your purse and he saw it.
Let me backtrack.
Yeah, think about it.
That came from where did it come?
Lorraine explained that she had spotted it on the ground near to the house and had scooped it up, placing it in her bag. In the chaos, she had neglected to mention it. Moments later, they discovered a second bullet, the same as the first, also in her handbag.
Told you that there were 2 bullets in your purse.
2?
2.
I don't know how there's 2.
Lorraine failed to produce an explanation for the 2 bullets. Investigators checked the state database for gun registrations and did not find that Lorraine had a legally owned firearm. At the time of her initial questioning, allowances were made for Lorraine's confused narrative. She had, after all, rushed to the station in a state of shock after discovering her good friend of over a decade brutally murdered. Now, however, these inconsistencies were rising to the surface. Lewis was on camera at an auto repair shop hours away from the house at the same time that Lorraine claimed he was confronting LaNell over her infidelity and shortly before she was shot. He drove to Bobby's home in Hawthorne later that day, and so could not have been at the top of the stairs in the house when Lorraine claimed to have seen him.
I could prove Lewis wasn't in the house when you said he was there. I got pictures of him. He wasn't anywhere near you. He wasn't anywhere near Palmdale.
My point is that I don't know whatever. I don't know. I saw what I saw.
Now looking back, is there anything that you want to tell us that's different?
Whole day doesn't make any sense to me, but that's just what I'm doing.
Did you kill your friend?
I did not kill my friend. I have no reason to kill my friend. I love my friend.
When Lorraine left the interview room following her questioning, officers looked on as she paused to acknowledge LaNell's mother. The two exchanged a few brief words, then Lorraine leaned in for a hug. Bobby, visibly uncomfortable, received the embrace without reciprocating.
The detective and this person walked out of the hallway. And the first thing I asked, I said, "How do you know LaNell?" And she said, we went to Crenshaw together. I said, "Crenshaw?" I said, "I don't know you." And she hugged me, and she said, "You have my condolences." I told the detective, I said, "I don't know her."
It seemed that Lorraine Austin was not who she claimed to be. She had not been close friends with LaNell since high school. Her story was a complete fabrication. Louis Bonaire was eventually released from county jail. It took a full month for law enforcement to verify his alibi and shift the focus of their investigation towards Lorraine Austin. But if Lorraine was not the old friend of LaNell's that she claimed to be, who was she? Investigators found that the 29-year-old was buried in thousands of dollars of debt and lived rent-free at her mother's house. Her only income appeared to derive from occasional hairdressing work that she picked up via advertisements on Craigslist. This was also how she encountered LaNell just weeks before her death, on an area of the website designated for women seeking women. The two met up romantically on a few occasions. During this time, detectives speculated that Lorraine had gotten a taste of LaNell's more comfortable, relatively luxurious lifestyle. The hard-working nurse had a blossoming career, a nice car, and a large home in a good neighborhood. Although she and Lewis had not yet fully furnished the house, they had big-screen televisions and other pricey electronics scattered across the spacious interior. It was not unreasonable to deduce that Lorraine wanted to be a part of that life. Investigators speaking to others in Lorraine's life found that since meeting LaNell, the hairdresser had been going on dates calling herself by LaNell's middle name, Crystal, and claiming to drive a BMW. LaNell was not as taken with her new girlfriend. Police found a breakup text message on her cell phone. It had been sent to Lorraine just 5 days before she was killed. LaNell wrote that she really wanted to make it work with her boyfriend, Lewis, but suggested that they remain friends. She hoped that Lorraine would still be happy to weave her hair. It was this breakup note, not the letter found at the scene, that was the real motive for the murder. Handwriting experts determined that the letter addressed to Lewis was penned by Lorraine, not LaNell. When the final lab results were returned from the crime scene, the evidence of Lorraine's guilt became overwhelming. DNA testing of the latex gloves were a match to the 29-year-old hairdresser. It was her shoe print found on the area rug removed from the living room and later stuffed into the back seat of the BMW. The thumbprint on the picture also matched Lorraine Austin. Although the murder weapon was never found, the registration for a 9mm Smith & Wesson pistol purchased by Lorraine processed through the state database shortly after the rest of the physical evidence came to light. The gun had been a recent purchase. It took weeks before the database updated, leaving police in the dark over the gun when Lorraine was first questioned. It was the last piece of the puzzle. Investigators theorized that Lorraine was spiteful over her rejection, as well as jealous and resentful of LaNell's life in general. Based on the physical evidence at the scene, they believed that Lorraine pulled her gun from her handbag while working on LaNell's hair in the living room. Using a pillowcase as a kind of silencer, she pulled the trigger, shooting from behind while LaNell sat facing the opposite wall, utterly unaware. It seemed likely that the elaborate cleanup was the initial plan to cover up the crime. The area, surrounded by desert landscape, offered ample space to hide her victim. But after pulling LaNell and other items to the garage, it was possible that Lorraine simply did not have the upper body strength to lift LaNell into the vehicle. At that point, she must have abandoned this plan and decided instead to frame Lewis. And it nearly worked. By the time the lab results came through and an arrest affidavit was drawn up, Lorraine had caught wind that Lewis had been released and was no longer a suspect in the murder. She knew that authorities would soon be knocking on her door, so Lorraine Austin fled the country. She was eventually located after an episode of America's Most Wanted aired in December 2011, featuring LaNell's story and images of Lorraine. A tip from a viewer led the FBI to Central America, where they apprehended Lorraine in Belize in January 2012. She was promptly extradited to the United States. Gone was the sad and helpful friend who would give law enforcement any information they needed to find LaNell's killer. This time, when Lorraine sat back down with the homicide team, she was evasive. She complained to detectives about how she had been portrayed in the press as a leech who sought to befriend LaNell only for what she could take from her, and became jealous and angry when rejected.
How was my trip? And how did I end up there?
We're just curious more than anything else.
I went. Go on vacation, like normal people do. Go exploring.
What did it say?
What did it say?
Oh, what did it? Oh, that I
What is
was
it, the
plotting
budget?
on my friend for what, financial support or something like that, or basically trying to mooch, and that I might be mooching on
On August 13, 2015, a Los Angeles jury found Lorraine Austin guilty of first-degree murder, as well as one count of using a handgun during the commission of a crime. Each of these convictions earned her a sentence of 25 years. An appeal argued to California's 2nd District Court in 2017 failed. The appeal was based solely on alleged procedural misconduct with jury selection, not the validity of the evidence that was stacked against her. Lorraine is currently serving 50 years to life in state prison. Louis Bonaire later married and became a father. LaNell Barsock is deeply missed by her mother, siblings, and extended family. They remember LaNell as a hardworking, fun, and loving young woman whose life was cut far too short. That was the tragic case of LaNell Barsock. Thanks for joining me, and thank you so much to Alec Kenny and Biddy for joining the Members Lounge. I'm Kevin, this is Just Thought Lounge, and I'll see you in the next one.
When the scene plays, tell me who the scream saves. I can hear the cries repeat. Gotta take my time, cause these crimes get deep, but these stories can't hide. Let me find my seat. Kevin, go ahead and settle in. Gotta be selective, doing all the research, keeping it objective. Always been effective, can say he got a knack. Pick it a